I get this week's money?
Goodbye,
I'm crying blood.
Our film starts with an explanation of how female vampires terrorize a city called Hamlet, led by one named Carmilla. The story ends with a baron going after Carmilla with a magic sword for turning his wife, but her cursing the women of the town before he could finish her off, making it so every girl in the town turns into a lesbian vampire at the age of 18, and their only hope being a member of the baron's bloodline breaking the curse. Fast forward to modern times, and the last of the bloodline is a nerdy guy named Jimmy, who basically simps for a girl named Judy who is dumping him, as she tends to do whenever she finds someone better temporarily. Jimmy and his buddy Fletch head to a pub where he explains his plans to get Judy back, which Fletch attempts to talk him out of it. He convinces him into going on vacation instead, so they throw a dart onto a map and plan a road trip to a place called Cragwitch. Meanwhile, Judy heads to some guy's house to celebrate dumping Jimmy, just to find out that he was married and she was the other woman. When the guys get to Cragwitch, Judy calls him about wanting to take him back, but the signal is weak and he can't hear her before Fletch takes the phone and destroys it. The two eventually have an argument over the whole thing, with Fletch being mad that there aren't any women where they are, but that stops as they see a bunch of hot girls coming out of a building and heading toward a Winnebago. This excites Fletch, who then heads toward the building expecting to see more just to find a bunch of guys. Eventually, a priest walks in with a beautiful girl who tries to gather people to help stop the curse, but all the men turn away. The priest sees Jimmy and freaks out. After he leaves, the bartender tells the guys about a place where they can get a free room. Fletch immediately takes off when he hears that that's where the girls from earlier were heading. We then watch as the girls' Winnebago breaks down. The ones not too high to know what's going on debate on what they should do, with some thinking they should stay in the van and the others thinking they should go back to the bar. Eventually, they start hearing noises on the roof. They open the window just for it to be Fletch and Jimmy. They invite the two in, and it's clear the girl Lottie has a thing for Jimmy. As the van powers back on, they drive off, and then we see a female shadow. Back at the pub, we see Judy asking the barkeep about Jimmy. The crew eventually make it to the inn, and they are very excited to find rooms and food and decide to have a party, which makes Fletch really happy, but Jimmy hangs back and eventually is joined by Lottie, who explains that the picture on the wall that he was staring at is of Carmilla the Vampire Queen, and that the girls are students studying the legends of the area. One of the girls says that she has to go to the bathroom, and is told that there is an outhouse outside. They decide to use the buddy system to go out, but both are attacked by a vampire. Back at the cottage, the power begins to fluctuate, similar to what happened at the Winnebago earlier. As one of the girls is taking a shower, she hears a sound out of the window and decides to investigate. She is first startled by a spider, but then a vampire takes her as well. When Fletch, Jimmy, and Lottie investigate, they see a vampire disappear into the woods. We then go back to where Judy is in her quest to stalk Jimmy to force him back. Her car runs into the same issue that the girls' Winnebago did. She goes outside to check the problem, and that's when we see something coming after her as well. Lottie, Jimmy, and a reluctant Fletch go checking the woods with a flashlight and eventually find the girls being seduced and bitten by vampires. One of the girls, now turned, goes and attacks Fletch, but is staked and killed by Lottie. The rest of the girls call to Lottie to join them, but she turns them down, which upsets them. They run and head back to the inn, with Fletch taking out one of them with a frying pan on the way. As they're devising a plan, Judy shows up and Jimmy lets her in. Jimmy takes Judy to the back while Fletch explains to Lottie who Judy is. Lottie admits her feelings for Jimmy and that she's a virgin. We then see the priest looking through vampire books with his daughter and arming up, his daughter's shadow being very vampire-like. Back at the inn, Judy's in full seduction mode. When he talks about how she needs to show that she's changed, she fangs out and attacks him.
You're really gonna have to show me you're different.
Oh, I'm different. Give me one.
Fletch puts an axe to her head, but she keeps coming before Jimmy finishes her off. Lottie then comes in and is excited to see her competition in two pieces, but before they can kiss, vampires attack. They recognize Jimmy and that Lottie is a virgin. Meanwhile, as Fletch is using the bathroom, he's attacked but is saved by the priest, who blesses the shower to turn it into holy water in order to melt the vampire. The priest then explains the town's curse to Fletch and that Jimmy is the chosen one to stop it. The two head to the village to find the tomb of the Baron. Back in the woods, we see the vampires have Jimmy and Lottie tied up. The head vampire explains that Jimmy and Lottie's blood will resurrect Carmilla. Back at the priest, we see more signs that his daughter is turning. The priest and Fletch head to the crypt of the Baron in search of the sword that can destroy Carmilla and find it, while Lottie takes the opportunity after the vampires leave to confess her love to Jimmy, which frustrates him that he finally has someone into him right before he's about to die. Fletch, outside with the sword, is confronted by the priest's daughter, who seduces him. She fangs out and walks straight into the sword.
So you're 18?
prove anyway.
Oh.
She falls into the crypt and melts. Fletch walks away without telling the priest what happened. Back in the woods, the vampires begin the ceremony to bring back Carmilla, and we get the first hint that the vampire leading the ceremony was the Baron's bride. Fletch and the priest show up with condoms of holy water and vampire hunting material, but end up running from the vampires instead. They place a cross on a tree holding the vampires back long enough to free Jimmy and Lottie, but just as they do, Carmilla's resurrection is completed. The priest sends them back for the sword that they forgot back at the car. When they leave, he gets overrun by the vampires. Meanwhile, Lottie has a fight with Ava after she is separated from the guys. She tricks Ava into thinking she is under her spell, but instead puts her cross necklace around her neck and decapitates her. Before she can celebrate, Carmilla grabs her. Fletch tries to save her, but only ends up distracting her as she grabs him too. This gives Jimmy time to grab the sword and throw it right into Carmilla's heart, killing her. All the girls still alive are turned back to normal, but to the dismay of Fletch, they're still lesbians, so he gets nothing out of it. The film ends with Lottie talking to them about becoming lesbian vampire killers before a shadow of a werewolf appears. Thanks for watching. If you like this content, please leave a like and subscribe, and hit the bell icon to know every time I update. If you want to help my channel grow, please check out my Patreon, where you can get access to content early, as well as see the content that can't be uploaded here on YouTube. Link will be in the description. Until next time.